Welcome to today's Explainer. Today, we're diving into a genuinely fascinating text from 2014 by an author named Su Feng. We're looking at something called the second home. Is it a boss-free utopia? Or is it a strict transaction? Well, this text outlines the philosophy of an intentional community that promises something literally all of us dream about: a forever home. We're talking about a place where all that relentless, crushing anxiety of modern survival, it just totally evaporates. But, as we're going to see as we dig into this material, this incredible promise comes with one absolutely unbreakable rule. And honestly, it's a rule that challenges basically everything we think we know about how human societies work. Let's get right into it.
Okay, let's dive into this. I want you to just take a second and imagine a place where you are entirely protected from the modern fears we all face every single day. I mean, think about the sheer exhaustion of hustle culture, right? The constant pressure of the gig economy, or just that low-level, nagging dread in the back of your mind that one bad month could completely ruin you. The fear of losing your job, getting catastrophically sick, or growing old all alone. Honestly, we spend so much of our lives just trying to build up a fortress against those exact possibilities. But what if there was a community just waiting to catch you, no matter what went wrong out there in the real world? What if your fundamental safety wasn't something you had to earn every day, but was just a given?
Well, our source material today outlines the philosophy behind exactly this kind of place. It's known as the second home or the new oasis for life. It's a highly intentional community dreamed up by a group that refers to themselves, and I find this so fascinating, as Chanyuan Celestials. You know, when I first read this part of the text, it totally caught me off guard, because according to Shufeng, this isn't just some physical place to live or a temporary retreat. It is meant to be a full-blown, cradle-to-grave sanctuary, a lifelong home where members are meticulously cared for through birth, aging, illness, and ultimately death, completely shielded from the harsh, unpredictable roller coaster of the outside world. And this setup fundamentally distances itself from the rigid structures we're all so used to. Think about traditional society. It is absolutely packed with bosses, supreme leaders, and people who essentially hold the keys to your livelihood. We are completely wired for a top-down chain of command, right? But the second home? It explicitly rejects anyone holding a supreme position. No supreme leaders whatsoever. Instead, the focus is entirely on servants and shared ownership. The deal is, if you devote your wisdom and your sweat to the community, you're an owner. Period. The end. There's literally no corporate ladder to climb, because the ladder just doesn't exist here.
I want to read a direct quote from the text here because it really hits the nail on the head. It says, "The spiritual guide and all branch directors are the servants of all members instead of the controllers of people's lives." This really highlights how deeply the source material emphasizes absolute, across-the-board equality. Think about what that would actually feel like in your day-to-day life. Imagine if your company's CEO or the mayor of your city viewed themselves strictly as your servant. Like their one and only job was to facilitate your well-being just because you invested your time and labor into the collective. It flips the entire traditional hierarchy completely upside down. It replaces authority with pure, unfiltered service.
Now, what's really interesting about this is the sheer, mind-boggling scale of the safety net being offered. The text promises that members are cared for completely unconditionally during life's absolute worst crises. We are talking about the deep physical vulnerabilities of old age, or the sudden, terrifying shock of unemployment. If a member faces a terminal illness, or honestly, just a profound, overwhelming sense of helplessness during a major life transition, this community pledges to be right there. It's built to be the ultimate, comprehensive safety net for literally every phase of human suffering. It essentially tries to wipe the concept of individual ruin off the map.
So how does this actually play out? Let's look at their remarkable open-door policy. The author, Shufeng, shares this very specific, really revealing anecdote about a Chanyuan celestial who is out working in regular, secular society. This member reached out and they were deeply anxious. They hated their current job, they were completely burned out, and they desperately wanted to quit. But they were terrified. They were unsure if they'd actually be allowed back into the safety of the community after leaving in the first place. And the text's response? An absolute guarantee of radical comfort. Because this person had previously worked hard to build the community, they were told they could return immediately. Literally, no permission needed. The door is just always, always open. And the philosophy gets incredibly dramatic and intensely communal here. The text declares, "Let us share bliss and misfortune together. Let us live and die together." The author makes a point to say that even if their beautiful home were to completely disappear, or if they became utterly impoverished and were struggling just to survive a bitter winter, it wouldn't change a single thing. They promise to squeeze into whatever rooms are left, share every single last bite of food, and face whatever comes completely side by side. No brother or sister is ever left outside the door to freeze. It is a profound, unwavering commitment to a shared destiny. But you knew there had to be a but, right? As you might expect with any system offering limitless, unconditional care, there is a boundary, a give and take. And that brings us to the catch. This utopian promise of a forever home is actually built on a very strict reality. There is an absolute caveat required to access this incredible safety net, and I gotta tell you, it's not for the faint of heart. Because maintaining a system where everyone is perfectly supported requires an engine that never, ever stops running. And that engine, well, it relies entirely on a very specific, intense kind of individual discipline. The text introduces a fascinating psychological mechanism to enforce this rule, which it calls the moral court. See, instead of relying on external managers or bosses or some kind of police force to prevent free riding, the community relies on intense self-policing. Every single member is expected to set up a moral court within their own conscience. You have to literally lawsuit and judge yourself to ensure you are contributing fairly. It is an entirely internal accountability system. And honestly, if you're anything like me, the idea of being rigorously cross-examined by your own brain every single day sounds incredibly stressful. But in this community, that intense self-reflection is the fundamental glue holding the whole utopia together. So how do you actually survive this internal moral court? Well, the text lays out some very strict boundaries. While the safety net is vast, it is absolutely off-limits to anyone who hasn't previously paid their dues. You must have demonstrably devoted your sweat or your money to the community. You're instructed to grow your own fruit, eat your own food, and completely banish any thought of getting things on the cheap. And crucially, exploiting the labor of others, that is strictly forbidden. And remember, this isn't an external police force telling you that you haven't worked hard enough. It is the sheer, inescapable guilt of your internal moral court. If you haven't contributed, your own conscience tells you that you have no right to the community's resources. So the crucial point here is that the seemingly boundless utopia is fundamentally transactional at its core. It's a two-step process. Step 1, you give. You actively participate in the physical building of the community, you labor in the fields, or you donate your wealth. Then comes step 2, you receive. You get that guaranteed home, that care in old age, that rock-solid safety net during a sudden illness. The ultimate safety net is a direct, undeniable result of prior, tangible sacrifice. You cannot, and I mean absolutely cannot, have step 2 without step 1. It's an unyielding equation. The entire utopia would just collapse the second people tried to receive before they had given. There's a quote that perfectly captures this whole concept. It goes, "If you give, you will receive, and you must receive. To receive, you should give, and you must give." It's this flawless circular logic of mandatory contribution and guaranteed reward. Just think about how absolute that phrasing is. It's not a polite suggestion. It's basically a law of their universe. Once you've actually paid your dues and put in the labor, the text explicitly says, don't worry about it anymore. You must receive, so just enjoy it freely. Your future is completely secure. But that initial mandatory contribution, that is absolutely non-negotiable. It is the uncompromising price of admission to a life without fear. Which leaves us with a really powerful thought to end on today. This community offers a total escape from the anxieties of modern life, right? No bosses, no fear of poverty, no dying alone, but it demands an entirely different kind of pressure, total, unwavering self-accountability. So I'll leave you with this to chew on. If your ultimate safety, your total survival, depended entirely on a society balanced on self-judgment and absolute contribution, could you survive the judgment of your own moral court? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope it gave you something fascinating to reflect on, and I'll catch you next time.